My name is Peter Macfadyen, and I live in Frome, which is over towards Bristol. So I suppose that's what my name is, rather than who I am. Who I am is now a 62-year-old man, and I'm involved in the sense of our conversations. My main involvement is because over the last 10 years, I've been much engaged with local politics in Frome, but also increasingly in other places around the country. Because, well, in that time, I got involved in trying to do local politics differently, basically saying that if we don't do it, no one else will, and that politics at the lowest level in Britain is a nightmare. If you think it's a nightmare at the highest level, then it's almost worse. No, that's impossible. But you know, there's very little that happens, and a great deal needs to happen. So I've been involved in that. I wrote a book called Flatpack Democracy about 5 years ago, and I've just written the second one, which is Flatpack Democracy 2. The first one is how to take power, and then the second one is, you know, what people have done with it. So it's the experience of people in Britain, primarily Britain, who've taken power at this lowest level and then done useful things. I mean, I have to say that prior to that, the whole of my working life has been in social justice of one kind or another. I've worked with the rights of disabled people, and I worked for a long time with Comic Relief on programs of theirs, designing programs. So quite a lot of work in Africa and other southern countries. I don't know what else in the sense of this conversation. Personally, a lot of my time is spent doing things like making cargo trikes and being a grandfather, as well as aforementioned democracy. We think, or people think, a lot of people think that they're living in one paradigm, and actually they're living in another. I woke up this morning and I was going to write something. I had in my head a whole little blog about how I know what's going to happen in the elections, which haven't taken place when I'm recording this. And what I know is going to happen is that we're going to get something which is a complete and utter farce, because we're going to think that, you know, a democratic process has taken place, but it didn't, and that the majority of people will have been sucked into this paradigm, which is basically doesn't exist. You know, but then I haven't written it because I realized that the elections are also incredibly important in relation to Brexit and austerity and so on. And I didn't want to do something which looked frivolous, because it's not meant to be frivolous. My main frustration is that localism and the movement of power from top to bottom simply hasn't happened in my lifetime and in my political, you know, the lifetime of my political activity. And that, you know, we continue to think that, as I say, or many of us continue to think that we live in a world where that might happen. So it's this twofold thing about that democracy isn't working. It really could happen if we would have genuine participatory democracy, but yet without support from above for that, it seems to be a very difficult thing to get going, and a very slow process to really engage or to reclaim politics, which is what I think this is all about. So long ago in the mist of the time, actually about 1985 or 6, I was in Uganda when President Museveni, Yoweri Museveni wasn't the president then, took over. And one of the first things that he did was to put into place a whole structure of democracy. In many ways, it was a democracy, whereby the small groups of households had particular powers. And then they amalgamated, you know, one person from that small group then went into the larger group, which was the village, which went into the town, and went all the way up. And the bit which makes it notable was that there were particular powers given to each of those levels, which related to those levels and couldn't be trumped by the higher levels. You see what I mean? And very early on, they made a thing of this by the president's brother's cows escaped and rampaged through a village. And the village council took him to task and fined him, which was, there was much publicity about. It was, I mean, whether they did it only as a publicity stunt, I don't know, but whether they did or not, it was great because it was the kind of thing which just wouldn't happen normally. And for me, that's where we need to be. I mean, what I want to see, or the better system for me, would be one in which people make decisions at the level in which they live, if you see what I mean. So the decisions that relate to Nunney Road, where I'm sitting now talking to you from Frome, would be made by us. So we could decide how often we wanted our street cleaned. We could decide whatever was relative, that, you know, related to us, the parking, whatever it might be. And then that moves its way up through Frome, through a district and a council and so on. And yes, there would be decisions made at a national level. But national would not interfere with what we're doing, and the resources, so in terms of money, would also come down to this level as well. So that's what my perfect system would look like. It would be one where localism really works, because there've been various attempts, or I don't know whether there were ever serious attempts, to move power down, you know, to a local level in Britain, and they've never really worked, because actually central government makes bloody sure that they don't work, because they want to hang on to too much of the power and the resources. So my you know, my better system would be one in which there was genuine localism and genuine masses of deep engagement at a community, at a personal, at a street, at a house level.